Vince Pittman, in his book entitled Unburdened, tells the story of an amazing surgery that took place in 2018. It occurred in a Connecticut hospital and required a group of 12 surgeons. They worked together for 5 hours to remove a tumor from the abdomen of a 38-year-old woman. Now that seems like a whole lot of surgeons to remove a single tumor, until you learn that that single tumor weighed 132 pounds. The tumor had been growing at the rate of 10 pounds a week, which means 40 pounds a month. I am such a math whiz. She had an ovarian type tumor, and apparently this particular type tumor tended to be very big, at least according to Dr. Andreichen, the lead surgeon. But even for an ovarian type tumor that it was, this was a record. According to Dr. Andreichen, the patient could no longer eat and was in extreme danger of blood clots and other related blood vessel damage. Along with this threat was all of the pressure on her internal organs. Dr. Andreichen remembered the first time that they met. She'd seen other doctors who told her that there was nothing that could be done. So Dr. Andreichen said that when he walked into the room, the patient had fear written all over her face. She felt hopeless. Can you imagine even having a 132-pound tumor in you? What must that have felt like? Well, after the surgery, her life was no doubt different. Think about the day after having 132 pounds removed from inside of you. Even though there must have been surgically related pain, she no doubt had to feel much better. Each day that passed, she felt even better. And then she was able to return to her husband and children with life back to normal. Dr. Andreichen said that each follow-up visit produced more smiles, more hope, and more joy. Well, Luke records an event in Jesus' life. Jesus was walking with his disciples, and they approached Jericho. And on the way, a blind man who was sitting on the side of the road, begging each day, heard the sound of the crowd passing by. He asked what was going on, and they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. So he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowds ahead of Jesus tried to quiet him. I assume they were both annoyed and embarrassed, but it did no good. He shouted all the louder, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped, and he ordered that the man be brought to him. Then Jesus asked him what he wanted him to do for him. "I want to see," the blind man replied. Jesus said, "All right, you can see. Your faith has healed you." Then instantly the man's eyes were healed and opened, and he followed Jesus, praising God. There are two threads at work here. One, that the blind man identifies in his request, which is mercy. And the other is what Jesus identifies in the man, faith. Mercy moved Jesus to hear the man out, listen to his request. Faith caused the man to shout, believing that Jesus could do something. Mercy rose a second time to grant the man's healing, which was also a sign of forgiveness, given the understanding of the cause of his abnormality in his day. Let's look at both today. A.W. Tozer says that mercy is God's goodness confronting human guilt. The belief in Jesus' day was that abnormalities such as a blindness were the result of sin. Now, this sin could be the individual's sin or the parent's sin. In fact, they believed that a child in the mother's womb could actually sin. But it was sin nonetheless. So the blind man cries out for mercy. He doesn't cry out for grace, but mercy, because he believes his situation is a situation of sin. He's looking for forgiveness as much as he is for sight. He probably believes what his culture has taught him. His blindness is a result of sin. Therefore, forgiveness of sin may result in his sight. Mercy has certain meanings, such as to stoop in kindness to an inferior, to have pity upon, and to be actively compassionate. Tozer makes a very good point about compassion. He says that the term compassionate is a verb declaring the action of compassion. Compassion, he says, is a noun. So Tozer states that we have made compassionate into a noun, that is, no action. We feel compassion, but we do not act upon it. He goes on to say that God actively compassionates suffering men. The truth is that unlike us, God is merciful by nature. It's who he is. He's compassionate. Compassion doesn't come forward at the reading of a news story about some injustice or tragedy or wrong. It's always there for God. Paul indicates this when he wrote, "Long ago, even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes." His unchanging plan has always been to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. And this gave him great pleasure. The key phrase is before he made the world, meaning he knew we would sin, we would fall, we would reject him. And yet, in his mercy and his lived out compassion, he planned our redemption, a way home, Jesus. God wasn't too proud to stoop in kindness to an inferior, to have pity upon, and to be actively compassionate. Jesus is the evidence of such. God just didn't stoop. He became one of us. You can't stoop any lower than that. God didn't feel just bad for us, compassion. He acted on that compassion and sent Jesus. He didn't just start and end at Christmas. It culminated at Calvary and won the victory on Easter. As Tozer said, God compassionates us. So the blind man cries out for mercy, but he does so in faith. It's a link that is easily missed. Why cry out for mercy if you don't believe the one you cry out to can deliver? The blind man was used to crying out alms for the blind, but to Jesus it was, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many times in life we find ourselves in a desperate situation. We are forced to believe. In 1998, Lois on New Year's Eve had both her carotid arteries on each side dissect simultaneously. I was at church serving a come-and-go communion when one of my staff came forward and whispered in my ear that Lois was at the emergency room at Mercy Hospital. The early word was a stroke. When I arrived, Nick and Emily were waiting in the waiting room, scared of course, and some folks from the church had arrived to care for them. I went in the ER to find her lying on a bed with her face drooping and unable to speak clearly. I can't even remember what I felt, but I was stunned and numb. Thankfully, her physical abnormality was temporary and speech improved within an hour. It started us on together as a family. There were some very scary moments which arose in the next few days, which led to her being transferred to ICU at University of Cincinnati Medical Center. But eventually we came home. After 3 years of treatment via blood thinners, a new doctor came to town with a procedure that could fix her problem. The problem we faced was that each year Lois stayed on the blood thinners, the possibility for stroke rose 3%. So this new doctor seemed to be the remedy. It was a new procedure which placed stents in her arteries, her carotid arteries, and in her case, clear up into the brain. This procedure wasn't available 3 years before when this all went down. It all sounded great until he said, "There's a 3% chance of major stroke and death." And my thought was, what's up with 3%? Everything was 3%. Stay on the current course and there's a 3% increase of stroke each year. Have the procedure, there's a 3% chance of stroke and death. And I wasn't ready to give a thumbs up. 3% is a small chance, unless it's your wife. After asking for his resume and doing some research on him, we met again with Dr. Ringer. It was time for me to have faith in God and faith in the doctor God had sent, Dr. Andrew Ringer. Dr. Ringer performed well, and God was amazing. Why tell you this? Because there were times I felt like the woman in Dr. Adrakian's office, afraid there was nothing that could be done. I felt like the blind man on the side of the road trying to get Jesus' attention. And the beauty of it is that God is already merciful, and faith, even desperate faith, gets his attention. God brought us Dr. Andrew Ringer. God used Dr. Andrew Ringer. And I thank God for Dr. Andrew Ringer. But more so, I thank God for Jesus.